My name is Megan. I'm standing in front of my easel, a half-painted canvas before me. The sunlight filters through the open window, catching the bold streaks of yellow I've just painted. It feels like a breath of fresh air, a symbol of the new life I've claimed for myself. As I look at the canvas, my mind drifts back to that fateful night at the restaurant. It was my sister Lisa's 30th birthday dinner. Our family, the Andersons, is a well-to-do bunch. My father, Henry, is a successful lawyer, and my mother, Vivian, is a socialite. They've always been very concerned with appearances and social status. Lisa, the golden child, has always been showered with love and attention, while I've often been the overlooked one. When I arrived at the fancy restaurant, I was greeted with a cruel sight. Lisa, with her perfectly coiffed hair and designer dress, smirked at me. "This table's for family only," she said, pointing at a rickety fold-out chair shoved beside the trash can. The smell of garbage mixed with the faint perfume of the flowers in the banquet hall. Everyone at the table laughed. My father let out a low chuckle, and my mother looked away, pretending not to notice. My cousins hid their grins behind their napkins. The waiter, clearly confused, hesitated, but I just nodded and walked over to the lonely chair. I sat there, my back against the wall, feeling like an outsider, a family joke. Lisa raised her glass, looking smug in the glow of everyone's approval. I watched as they enjoyed their meal, chatting and laughing, while I sat in silence. But then, when the plates were cleared and the dessert was gone, the bill arrived. It was a staggering $4,600. The waiter's eyes scanned the table and then landed on me. "Miss, will this be on your card?" I could feel everyone's stares and smirks. They always assumed I'd pick up the tab. I was the responsible one, the one who worked hard at my graphic design job, the one who had bailed them out of financial troubles time and time again. But that night, something snapped inside me. I looked at the waiter and smiled. "Not my table," I said firmly. The room froze. Lisa's fork clattered to the plate. My father's chuckle disappeared, and my mother's lips parted, but no words came out. The waiter raised an eyebrow and then turned the leather folder towards Lisa, the head of the table. Panic flickered across their faces. In that moment, I realized they hadn't invited me to the table, but they couldn't eat without me. They were so used to me being their safety net, their invisible wallet. Lisa started to scramble for her purse. My father barked, "Megan, stop being dramatic. Just pay it like you always do. We'll sort it out later." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "No, Dad. You made it clear I'm not family. And if I'm not family, then this bill isn't mine." Gasps rippled across the table. Lisa's smirk faltered, and her hands fumbled with her designer bag. "You can't be serious. I don't have the money for this tonight." The waiter cleared his throat politely. "Ma'am, the restaurant requires payment in full." Lisa's face reddened. She turned to my mother. "Cover it. She's just trying to humiliate me." My mother avoided my gaze and whispered, "Megan, please. Don't make a scene." A bitter laugh bubbled up in my chest. "I didn't make this scene. You did. When you pushed me to the corner, when you laughed while I sat alone. You wanted me out of sight? Fine. But don't expect me to foot the bill for a meal I wasn't invited to enjoy." The waiter placed the leather folder firmly in front of Lisa. The sound echoed like a gavel. For once, the room wasn't filled with laughter. It was filled with the weight of their own entitlement pressing down on them. And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one carrying it. I was free. The ride home was tense. Lisa refused to look at me as she fumbled with her credit card at the register. Her voice trembled as she signed the receipt. My father grumbled about respect under his breath, and my mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, embarrassed not by what they had done, but by what I refused to do. I walked out first, the cool night air washing over me like a blessing. I had left them to choke on their own bill, their own arrogance. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. You humiliated us last night. Everyone's furious. Dad says you're selfish. Selfish. It was the same word they always used when I said no. I typed back, not selfish. Boundaries. I put my phone down and made coffee in my quiet apartment. The steam curled like a victory flag. By noon, my cousins were messaging me too. Why didn't you just pay? It's what you always do. They were right. That was the problem. They had written me into a role I never agreed to. But last night, I rewrote the script. By the weekend, the family group chat lit up. My mother wrote first. Megan, your father and I are deeply disappointed. You embarrassed us in public. Then my father chimed in. If you want to be treated like an adult, act like one. Adults handle responsibility. And finally, Lisa. You ruined my birthday dinner. Everyone thinks I'm broke because of you. I stared at the screen and let out a quiet laugh. Responsibility? I had been carrying theirs for years. I had paid for Lisa's vacations, my parents' home repairs, and countless other expenses. This wasn't about responsibility, it was about control. I set the phone down and picked up my paintbrush. For years, I had muted my own colors to make room for theirs. Now, I was painting loudly, recklessly, unapologetically. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. A single message from my father. Don't come to Sunday dinner unless you're ready to apologize. I smiled, dipped the brush in blue, and whispered to myself, then I guess I won't be there. Sunday came, and for the first time in years, I didn't drive to my parents' house. I spent the morning in my apartment, sipping coffee and breathing in the smell of fresh paint. Around noon, my phone lit up with missed calls. First, my mother, then my father, and then Lisa, her name flashing again and again. Finally, a text came through. The kids keep asking where Aunt Megan is. Do you really not care about them? There it was, the guilt card. Lisa knew I loved those kids. They were the only reason I had put up with years of mockery, late-night babysitting, and endless errands. But love for them didn't mean servitude to her. I typed slowly, carefully. I care about the kids, but I won't teach them love means being used. Find another lesson. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, and then appeared again. Then there was silence. I set my phone aside and walked to the balcony. The sun stretched golden over the city, and the rooftops glowed. A breeze lifted my hair as I breathed in the quiet. It felt like stepping into a life I'd been denied for years, a life where my worth wasn't measured by what I paid or what I sacrificed. By Monday, word had spread through the extended family. An aunt messaged me privately. I heard what happened at the restaurant. Honestly, Megan, good for you. They've leaned on you too long. Her words made me pause. For years, I thought no one noticed the way I always covered the check, the way I was pushed into the background. But apparently, they had. People saw, they just never said it out loud. Later that day, my father left a voicemail. His voice was sharp. You've embarrassed this family. Your sister's friends are talking. You think this makes you strong? It makes you cruel. I replayed it twice, not out of guilt, but to absorb the irony. Cruel? After years of being laughed at, dismissed, treated like the backup plan? Cruel was letting me sit by the trash while they dined like royalty. That night, I took out the receipt for my own dinner, a simple takeout meal I'd grabbed on the way home from the restaurant fiasco. $14.75. I taped it into my journal and wrote underneath, best meal of my life. Because it was mine. The next morning, Lisa texted again. You're not family anymore. I stared at the words, letting them settle. Not family. And yet, for the first time, I didn't feel rejected. I felt free. The days that followed were lighter than I ever imagined. My mornings weren't filled with dread of their demands, and my evenings no longer echoed with their criticisms. I painted until the sun dipped below the skyline, colors spilling across the canvas like freedom made visible. On Wednesday, a cousin sent me a screenshot from social media. Lisa had posted a long paragraph full of self-pity. Some people turn their backs on family when things get hard. Money isn't everything, loyalty is. The comments were split. Some echoed her words, but others, surprisingly many, asked the question she'd avoided. Why was Megan always the one paying? That same night, my mother called again. Her tone was softer, almost broken. Megan, this is tearing us apart. Can't you just forgive your sister? Do it for the family. I let her speak and then answered slowly. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Respect is. And until you understand that, there's nothing to fix. She went quiet. The line was heavy with things she wanted to say but couldn't. When I hung up, I felt no guilt, only clarity. The following Sunday, I sat in my apartment with the windows wide open. Sunlight stretched across the floorboards. I brewed coffee, and its warmth filled the room. For the first time in years, I didn't brace myself for Sunday dinner. I imagined the scene at my parents' house. The forced smiles, the tension simmering beneath the surface, Lisa pretending not to feel the eyes on her. They had always prided themselves on appearances, but appearances were expensive, and this time, the check hadn't landed in my lap. As I scrolled through my phone, another message appeared. This time from my mother. We miss you. I stared at the words, turning them over in my mind. Did they miss me, or did they miss what I gave them? I set the phone aside and pulled out my journal. On a blank page, I wrote, "Love without respect isn't love. Family without dignity isn't family. Tonight, I choose myself." I closed the book and walked back to my easel. I dipped my brush into the jar of yellow and dragged it across the canvas, bold and bright. It felt like breathing. As I painted, I thought back to that night at the restaurant. Not my table. Those words had changed everything. They weren't just about a bill, they were about a lifetime of being sidelined, mocked, and erased. And finally, I was refusing to pay for my own erasure. I stepped back from the painting, sunlight catching on the streaks of yellow, and smiled. This was my table now. My home. My life. And no one could take the seat I had built for myself.